That's for the Q&A. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and welcome to Exile and Bookville's Authors on Tap reading series. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm Javier Ramirez, and along with Kristen Gilbert, co-run Exile and Bookville, an online entity with a physical space coming to Chicago the end of summer. We have a great event lined up here tonight. Way back in 2014, David Stuart MacLean wrote one of the best memoirs I've ever had the pleasure of reading. The Answer to the Riddle Is Me, which is a fascinating memoir, but also has one of the all-time best titles. Like I just love the title to that. Just says so much. And when you read the book, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It won Best Memoir Biography by the Society of Midland Authors, and then was one of the best books of 2014 by Kirkus Reviews, which is kind of a big deal. David's writing has appeared in Plowshares, Guernica, the New York Times, and The Guardian. He also founded the Poison Pen reading series in Houston, Texas, and I have questions about that later. I consider David to be a good friend and was so excited to hear the new novel out, How I Learned to Hate in Ohio, from Overlook Press, which came out in January. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I'm excited to hear Scott and David talk about the novel. And he'll be in conversation with his good pal Scott Brown, who, on top of writing the hilarious and touching XL, one of my favorite YA novels in recent memory, has written for a little HBO sensation you might have heard of called Sharp Objects, based on the Gillian Flynn best-selling novel, as well as the critically acclaimed Castle Rock series on Hulu, and is a co-creator and executive producer of the upcoming horror drama Overlook, a world extension of The Shining, which will be executive produced by J.J. Abrams for HBO Max. I'm going to get a few things out of the way here before we get started. If you have questions towards the end of the conversation, you can either use a raise hand function or post them in the chat, and we will be happy to get, Scott will be happy to take those questions and ask them of David. Both books, all three books, will be available. We'll also post the link in the chat so you can buy as many books as you would like. And with every book purchase comes a signed book plate from both of the authors. And we really do appreciate you guys being here tonight, and any support that you give to Exile. It really goes a long way towards us achieving that goal of opening physical space later this year. Yeah, I think that's it. Feel free to keep your camera on during the event, but please mute yourselves until we get to the Q&A portion of the event. I'm going to hand it off to Scott, and enjoy the show, everybody. Good luck, guys.
Thank you, Javier. This is so great. Thanks for having me and having both of us, and I'm just so excited to be here to celebrate this amazing novel by David MacLean, and I'm going to hold it up as if I were a late night host. I'm going to hold it up. There we go. Everyone's holding it up now. This book, David kind of like, I was lucky enough to be given a little bit of a window into this book before it was published. David, was wise enough to not actually ask my opinion about the writing, because I'd be of no help at all. But was just kind of like, hey, you're a guy who's around my age, who lived in this time. Would you like to read this and sort of re-experience the unique horror of those years? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. The amazing thing about this book is how many times it made me cry and how many times it made me laugh, and often at the same time. It's like it is about such a specific time in life, and obviously plenty of fiction has been set in high school and everything else, but this particular time period that we both grew up in, we're both young in, has such a specific, there was such a specific cruelty to it and such a specific absurdity. And I have never seen it captured better than it is here. It speaks so, it's in all of its ridiculousness and trashiness and ugliness and rawness and unexaminedness, which is very different than the hyper examinedness of now. It's you know, I've never been taken back to that as powerfully and as hilariously and as painfully as I was by this book. And so David, I just kind of want to start out by asking you if the time period it came from came first for you, for like where you wanted to live emotionally while you were writing this, or if the story came before that, or if they weren't really separable.
I think when I started thinking about the story, and I thought about like a Sikh kid growing up in Central Ohio.
Maybe we should actually give everybody the premise first. Actually, I realized I just left out that part. Would you like to kind of just sum up the basic storyline?
Sure. So the book centers on a kid named Baruch Nadler, who's named, sadly, his father's a philosophy adjunct, and he named him after Spinoza, which is kind of a jerk move on a dad's part. And so he names him after Spinoza, and he goes by Barry. He's desperate for everybody to call him Barry. And he doesn't have a lot of friends, and his parents are sort of checked out. And so he's sort of left alone a lot. And into his life comes this Sikh kid named Gurbaksh Singh. But nobody in Central Ohio will try to pronounce Gurbaksh. And so the school names him Gary. And so we have two kids who are fighting for a name, and the names that they get called and the names they wish they were called is a big part of this book.
And the name to you know, to go right to the big H word in the title. This is called How I Learned to Hate in Ohio. The name that Barry is called is not the name he would want to be. In fact, it is well, I guess what would now be described as a rather problematic name. Can you tell us about the name he actually is called?
Yeah. So his nickname is Yo-Yo Fag, and everybody at school calls him that. It's weird to live in a time and to see like a word, like that word is now taboo. Like you don't use that word at all. It's an awful word. I think we've, as a culture, have figured that out, which is weird for me because growing up, it was like everywhere.
It was the air we breathed.
Yeah.
That was, yeah.
And especially if you were like a drama kid, you got called that a lot. And so like, it's just interesting to watch a term age out. But because it was set during this time period, I decided to keep the name, even though it's problematic now. It was problematic then, we just didn't know it.
Right. No, it was a different, it was very different. And but also like there's like the awfulness of fag is weirdly super collided with the absolute absurdity of Yo-Yo. And to me, like there's so much of like the bizarre tone of your book is achieved by the kind of because it comes from like every stupid nickname you get in school. It comes from like the dumbest story imaginable. And what is that story? I think it's a very simple story.
It was just like Barry brought a yo-yo to school and this other kid wanted to use it. And he knew if he gave it to the kid would take it and never give it back. So he said no. And because of that, he got the name Yo-Yo Fag, which has followed him since like 7th grade. My cat has made an appearance.
Was your cat there? Oh, yeah. Wow. Cat reveal.
Cat reveal. So yeah, so the book is about Barry and Gary's friendship, and what's going on with their parents, Gary's dad has been in love with Barry's mom for a long time and has finally found her. He met her on a business trip years ago, and now he's found her, and he's there to upset their home. He's like Gatsby. He comes in and wants the relationship he wants, which is with a married woman. The idea of the book came to me. I had a grad student professor who loved Great Gatsby. And I was still coasting off how I felt about it in high school, which was it sucked.
Which is
And
kind of
so,
like that made you like that's kind of like an outlier position still, right? I mean, like even post Catherine Schultz's Why Gatsby is Bad sort of, fad of however many years ago. But at that point, you're still kind of like flying in the face of Gatsby as the great American novel.
yeah. Except, so, this grad professor really loved the book. And so one summer when I was working construction, I listened to Gatsby every day for 2 weeks. And just I wanted to like make myself figure out why this was such a book.
You're pouring concrete and listening to Gatsby. That's like
running baseboard, pouring concrete. Yeah.
Did the other guys, did it fall out of it? What they're like, hey, what are you listening to?
No way, man. They couldn't hear me over the classic rock radio, whatever morning zoo crap was on. So yeah. And so what I started thinking about was like, Tom and Daisy have a kid. And when Daisy disappears, she just leaves that kid motherless for weeks at a time. And I thought about, what if that story was narrated by the kid and not by Nick Carraway? And how would that change? And so, yeah, that's sort of where it came from. And then the time period was really important because I remember really clearly between 85, 86 to like 90, 91, 92 was this pendulum of hate that swung from gay people, everybody hating gay people in my school, to everybody hating Muslims. Because we went into the first Gulf War, and there was this popularized hate of Islam. And so Gary gets caught in it, even though he's not a Sikh, but try to parse out what the difference between a Sikh and a Muslim to high school students in Central Ohio. So yeah, that's sort of where it all came from. And I think about that pendulum a lot because it makes me realize that there's just free floating hate, and it's just looking for people, looking for the next vulnerable group. And that's just terrifying. But you see it all the time. Like all of a sudden, everybody hates blah, blah, blah. Like there's hate fashion as much as anything else.
Yeah. It's like a kind of fandom, weirdly. Yeah. They feel very related to me in a very disturbing way.
Yeah.
And sometimes one can turn into the other.
Yeah.
And yeah. It's yeah. No, I mean, one of the ways you demonstrate that free floating hate and how it can attach to just about anything is there's a part of the book towards the end, which I don't think I'm giving anything away by saying this, which involves the Challenger explosion in 1986, and which, like, anybody who's about our age has a really specific memory of that. I mean, obviously anybody who was alive then has a, aware, but I think people who were in school, I was in grade school, and I remember, I mean, you describe in the book so clearly how the teachers would wheel in the TV from the AV room, you know, and it had been the launch time had been pushed so many times that they would wheel in the TV and then they would wheel it back out again, and then they would, you know, and this happened over and over again until the launch actually happened, and then, you know, and then what happened.
Right. And the teachers were identifying with Krista McAuliffe. They were like, "This is us. We're up there. Teachers are going into space." And so when it exploded, everybody just looked to the teacher.
Yeah.
I remember in my middle school, 2 weeks after the explosion, this kid, TJ, got thrown out of school for like a week because he had said, "I wish," to Mrs. Brown, like, "I wish you were on the Challenger," and got thrown out of school, which made him a kind of folk hero in my
I'm sure.
my middle school.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, what's interesting is that like it went, it's so, your use of that in the book is so fascinating, because you're talking about this pendulum and this like kind of free floating sort of like protein of hate that kind of will just attach to anything that's around it. The Challenger was so fascinating because it was this moment of utter horror, and the kids didn't know what to do with it emotionally. The teachers didn't know what to do with it emotionally, and everybody caught their breath. And within a few days, the joke started.
Yeah.
And that it was like, that was, and it was a strange way. It just shows you how like that kind of cruelty is like such a, it's such a, just, you know, a defense mechanism, you know.
Mhm.
It's such a, like, it's this caulk that goes into a hole.
Yeah.
Easiest thing. Like, yeah, how did you know that was going into the book, that was going to be, you know, a part of it, or was it just you kind of excavating that time for yourself?
No, I definitely wanted it in there because I'd been thinking about that image of the Y when it exploded and there was a Y in the sky, right? And in the center of the Y, there was like a dotted line of what was supposed to happen.
Right.
You could kind of, there was like a ghost future that you were looking at. But that didn't happen. Instead, this happened. And like, that's true for a lot of our lives, that we think X is going to happen, but instead something blows up and we're not there. And it's hard to give up on that initial idea, that desire for the future you were going into, but which now is obliterated, impossible. And I feel like that's what Barry goes through in this book, is he thinks he knows what's going to happen and he doesn't.
Yeah. And you want to know with him too. It's like you want to trust that, and you keep being Charlie Brown with that football with him.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that was what struck me. It was like I kept, you know, I had an intellectual sense of where this is going, but I don't want to commit to it. I want to, you know, want to be with him on that ghost trajectory you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, you that happens to all of these characters in one way or another, and especially to Barry, since he's your way through, and just that sense of contingency and how things can. I mean, you know, you crystallize it so well, talking about all the scrubbed shuttle launches before the one that goes up, and you're trading that off with the stuff that's happening in the story and the turmoil with Gary and his parents, and with Gary and his, what happens. Yeah.
Or Barry's love life.
Yeah, Barry's love life to the extent that it can be described that way. Would you like to read a little bit, possibly? Do you have a part that you'd already liked to read, or would you like me to suggest something?
I'm going to read something new that I haven't read.
Oh, good.
I was looking at it before, and I decided it's chapter 2, so you don't need to know much. My home room was really not all that new. We were in the same building we were in for junior high. Now we were just in the other half. Construction was being done on the new high school over on Euclid Avenue, some sprawling design from a California architect, a fact that had been a big part of the bond issue campaign, as if California architect was a signifier of the highest possible quality. The building we were in was constructed during the WPA. Well, half of it was. The other half was built during the 50s, an addition made with no attempt to join the two by any design concept. It was a massive building cleaved down the center, the junior high on the old side, the high school on the newer side, with just a single narrow hallway connecting the two. It was a new room, but homerooms are assigned by last name and grade. I'd been standing in lines next to these kids forever. Our teacher was Mrs. Black. She told us to call her Ms. Black, but within 10 minutes, it was clear that it was not going to stick. Mrs. Black's husband was my dentist. He once took my mom, dad, and me out on his boat on Lake Erie to fish. My dad and he got to be buddies somehow or other. My dad ended up friends with a lot of these professional guys who'd like to have a philosopher friend, made them feel smart or something. They adopted my dad like a weak kitten. They bought him lunch and told him their justifications for the shitty things they did. This is what they thought philosophy was, justifications for being an asshole. You know who's awful? Dentists who read Nietzsche. What my dad actually did was draw diagrams and equations and stare at them for an hour or so before giving up. He said it was the benchwork of philosophy that no one cared about. His dissertation was a diagramming of a sentence by Hegel in the original German and then in 3 different English translations. It was 500 pages long. We used to keep the living room window open we used it to keep the living room window open in the summer. Mrs. Black read Roll. Maybe because I knew her outside of school, maybe because I mowed her lawn and helped her clean her basement when it flooded this summer, maybe because I'd seen her in a swimsuit. Maybe I just expected a little bit of kindness, but she read my full name anyway. Baruch Nadler? Barry, I said while raising my hand. I go by Barry. I was not sure what I expected. It was going to be a long day of correcting teachers. I was named after Baruch Spinoza, a 17th century Jewish philosopher from Amsterdam. Hegel supposedly said, you're either a Spinozist or not a philosopher at all, which is why my dad bullied my mom into this ridiculous name. So I have a Jewish first name, which means blessed and gets me punched after class. Try being this kid with this name in this town, the kind of place where most people thought Jewish was a kind of salad dressing. Maybe Yo-Yo Fag was a blessing. The factory's kids run the schools. I was of different stock than they were, thinner boned, weaker skinned, a more tender build, shortest kid in my class 8 years running. I barely survived the moments in between classes. I paid attention in class because I wanted that time to extend and last forever. Wrap me in the triple fold of fatted sacrifice Odysseus offers up to Algebra 2. Let me remain physics-drenched and band-tired. My greatest wish was for there to be human-sized pneumatic tubes I could climb in and be sucked through from class to class. Just don't put me in the hallways where the real owners of this town reinforced their lien on my body. Fag tags, rednecks, Indian burns, knuckle punches, Charlie horses, calf bites, wedgies, purple nurples, swirlies, frogging, dope slaps, sternum typewriters, 2 hits for flinching. Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself. It's one thing to be weak in this world. It's another to be reminded of it all the time. By assholes. Welcome, students, the speaker over the door crackled and came to life. Let's start the day with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'll just stop there.
Oh, that was fantastic. That was
thank
fantastic.
you.
So yeah, you see why I love this book. Yes, yeah, no, it's one thing to be weak in this world. It's another to be reminded of it hilariously. So, Can I also just say that any book that describes a subscription journal as thick enough to break the spine of a possum, and that's just something you're tossing off, that's not even the point of that, is hats off.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, one thing I'm curious about is that, like, you know, I am always emotionally confused in a really pleasant way by bleak fiction that nonetheless makes me, I don't know, it reminds me that people have real feelings and the ability to act on them a little bit. And it's like, as dark as this can get, and as not Pollyanna-ish as it is, I'm really struck by all the weird little moments of grace that you find that make me hold on to the humanity of these people. And I'm, do you, were there things in crafting this particular story, which is, you know, not going anywhere particularly happy, that you sort of felt, no, that's too much, that's like that's just despair for despair's sake, I'm not actually going to take that turn? Did you, were there bleak things on the cutting room floor?
Let me think. No, I don't think so. I think I think I included all the bleakness.
All the money's on the screen, as they say.
Yeah.
All the bleakness is,
it's like 30% more bleak.
It's
but yeah, I'm drawn to bleak books. I like bleakness, but I also like funny. I like funny and brutality together. I like the sort of mixture that comes from those two. And my favorite books have that. Like Nathaniel West is one of my favorite writers, and like he is so funny and so unbelievably bleak. And that's, yeah, that's just sort of where I like to write from.
On the other end of that, were there times you were tempted to redeem Barry more than you ultimately do?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I wanted to give him more excuses, but he doesn't. He makes some bad choices, and he's going to have to live with those for the rest of his life, and that's just part of it. Is you know, I wish I could have written the book where Barry acted heroically throughout, but that wouldn't have been true. He's been given no models of heroism. He is not even taught that heroism for him is an option. And instead he runs. He always runs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting reply too, because I think the other thing I remember so much about the 80s, other than like the kind of like just, you know, weird sort of ambient bullying that kind of sort of characterized the Reagan era, there was the counter myth of that was like the Karate Kid, you know, the weak kid who does act heroically and who is redeemed in his weakness into something strong, into being a hero, which was also bullshit. You know, it was that almost gave rise to the sort of like, I mean, now that's almost laughable because like we are overrun with nerds who turned into fascists basically. And like it's so I mean the idea, the romantic notion of like, oh, the nerd will rise from the kind of shambles of his own weakness and become, you know, something. It's you know, that's something we're still recovering from, and I felt like this book had something to say about.
Right? Like there was this sort of like America loves an underdog story, but also hates an underdog. It's a weird thing. like willing to cheer on an underdog, right? For some reason, people are like, "Oh, Oral Roberts University is awesome." And do you not know? Like, it's just a basketball game. They won. Okay, they won a couple basketball games, but look at their code of conduct. This is not the school you want to get behind. But yeah, I feel like real underdogs, our country does a great job of marginalize and ghettoizing real underdogs and having contempt for them. But we love an underdog story, which is weird to me. But yeah.
Yeah, that weird kind of like, I don't know, sadistic notion of, if you can survive all this, then now we'll have respect for you. And
Now we'll have respect for you. Oh, how awful all that happened while we were there watching.
But yeah, I mean, it's just so weird that is the unglamorous, like, inside out of the Gatsby notion. That like that like, you know, the degree, the other thing I loved about this book was, like, you know, not just the valence of, is Gatsby good or is Gatsby bad, but this whole notion that, like, maybe we've really misread Gatsby in this country. Maybe the weird veneration of the Great Gatsby has actually told it might have delivered the opposite of what Gatsby actually is to us.
Yeah. You look at any movie version of Gatsby and they tell it like a love story, and it is not a love story. Like when Gatsby and Daisy get together, we don't hear anything from them. Like, they're suddenly off, like, all the parties are canceled. Nick's sort of sidelined.
Yeah.
So we don't get a lot of Gatsby and Daisy together in love, because they're both just holing up in their delusion. And it's a really untenable delusion. And I think, like, that's what I love the book for, is like, to show that these grand gestures of romantic thing can be wrong.
Yeah.
Daisy's in a bad marriage. There's no doubt about it. But her marriage to Gatsby wouldn't be better.
Right. Wouldn't even be like anything. I mean, like, it's not even describable, and it's not just it's not like, oh, this is so wonderful, we have to keep it off screen. It's more like the story. We don't know where to go with this now. It's not. It doesn't make any. It actually doesn't make any sense, and they don't really know each other.
They don't really know each other. She cries over his shirts, for damn sake. I mean, like there is so many moments of that book where it pushes you away from what we want to assume about it. I think it's a harder book. If you drain away, like, I feel like I was taught it really badly in high school. I was taught it as a book of symbols, right? The glasses, the green light, all of that. Never any conversation about the language and what the language is doing in that book, which is just gorgeous. And instead, you focus on, like, the Valley of Ashes and this, and the book is way more interesting than those symbols. But I guess in a freshman, sophomore lit survey, they just want you to learn how to read symbols.
Right. Because that alone is so, alien to, well, especially, like, I mean, and I feel like, and the problem is, it really was. I mean, to people growing up in the sort of, like, suburbs in the 1980s, like, there was a profound literalism and sort of that was everything. So the idea that, like, oh, this could mean more than one thing is both suspicious and also exciting, and, like, and you don't really get much further than that.
Which is, like, the kind of teaching where kids are taught that authors have secret meanings that they've encoded in the book. And
Right.
it's your job to Dan Brown the shit out of it.
Right.
And like
Right.
figure out all the whatever. And it's like, no, actually, you don't need to decode a book. We can talk about your reading experience and then maybe read it again and talk about that experience.
What? Talk about feelings? No.
God.
No, it's got to be much better to find codes and mysterious messages and let's National Treasure this shit. It's like National Treasure. National Treasure. Nicolas Cage and National Treasure. That might actually be our true.
Yeah.
That might be our true like American kind of like source text. That might be. It's like the idea that like what is the Constitution? It's a thing that has secret messages in it, and if you're smart enough and good enough, you can find them.
Yeah.
It's literally it is how we look at everything.
Yeah, it's this idea that knowledge gains you access into secret clubs.
Right. Yes.
Right. And I'm watching a QAnon documentary and I'm thinking about that a lot. But it's this myth of like, if you know something, now you're at a higher level than other people. Like you are climbing up the ladder of knowledge rather than knowledge being this great field you get to walk around in.
Right.
And like, oh, there's a new part of the field I get to go to because I read this book. Like that's much more interesting than a linear upward motion of knowledge.
Oh yeah, way more interesting. But it is very much like in the environment you describe of that high school and the power structures that prowl those halls and reinforce their leans, as you say. Like it's like that's what you need, I guess. Secret knowledge or something to give you an edge. Something to give you. I mean, look how many freaking societies we create, and it's like that's the de Tocqueville thing. It's like the American propensity to create associations, which is a good thing. Civic associations, this club. But what you end up with is this insane menagerie of like, the Elks and the Lions and the Shriners and the Rotarians and these weird tribes that are all based to a certain extent on some kind of weird exclusivity or secret knowledge, or that, and then you see the same thing happen in text, like when people read Gatsby or when they watch a TV show and immediately anatomize it and mythologize it. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this, I think there's some desire to be part of a secret society. Like if I could just be a part of a secret society, then I would know the man behind the curtain.
Right.
Instead of being like, every person is behind a curtain.
Right. Right. Your
goal should be to get out from the curtain. But instead,
no, it's more.
We want to believe that in the room where it happened or whatever.
Yes. That's the room where it happened. That feels like even Hamilton is kind of that to a certain extent, right? When you think about it, it really is about that, as leveling it is, as much as it like kind of celebrates this reassignment of these hierarchies to other groups, it then like just loves those hierarchies and loves the idea of like, a man alone in his study with his books and his Faust-like ambitions, and like, that's still a thing.
That's still a thing. You're gonna bend the world to your intellect.
Right. Yeah. Well, what should we do? Do you think it would be? Is this a good time to open things up to some questions from the floor? Would that be a? Let me see if I can open up my chat here. Okay. All right. My chat thing is open, and I am looking, and I think there's a hand raising button that we have also on all of our little screens. So if anyone wants to, oh, hello, hang on. Hang on, can I unmute? I don't know if I have the power to unmute. We have hands from Chris.
Or you can just ask, you can ask people to unmute if they have a question.
Oh, they can
We have a
unmute.
small
Okay.
enough crowd. Yeah.
Yes, Catherine, you first and then Chris.
Okay, thanks. First, I would just want to say congratulations. I loved your book, David.
Oh, thanks, Catherine.
And I had kind of an interesting experience because I was reading the book. I live in Utica, New York, which is about an hour from Syracuse. And I take care of my parents in Syracuse. So I had your book on my night table in Utica, and I had Shuggy Bain on the night table in Syracuse. And so I was going back and forth between the two books, and it had such a universal feel to it because so many of the themes were similar, and the, you know, sort of the age and the kinds of bullying and the, you know, the, but also they're both so beautifully written that I was so sad when that period ended of reading those two books at the same time. My question has to do with the title. So when I first started recommending this book to other people, I was funny about the title. Like the title, it's not what it is. But then it kind of grew on me, and now I don't explain the title. I just say this is a really great book that you should read. Can you tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the title and people's reaction and that whole thing?
Yeah. You know, I went back and forth on that title a lot. But I do love it. It's funny, you know, my parents, when my first book came out, they made a T-shirt for them and for me of the book cover on the back. And so it was like a custom T-shirt with my book cover on it. My parents have not made T-shirts for this book. And so I understand it. I just kind of wish my mom would go to the grocery store wearing that. But yeah, no, it's a hard title, and I kind of wanted it to be hard. I wanted it to be uncomfortable, which probably isn't a great strategy for selling books. I should have named it like 16 Ways to Look Better Naked. But instead,
Yeah,
I sort of,
that was my, I sent that one to you.
That
You shot
was-
it down. You shot it down pretty hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, instead I wanted, I liked the rhythm of it. I liked the idea that this was a learning journey, but also learning something you don't want to learn. And I sort of like that. I like that sort of conflict, that we have this kid who's sort of obsessively bookish and super nerdy. And this is actually what he's being taught. This is what he's learning at school. And yeah. And so, yeah, I you know, I get a little flummoxed by the title every once in a while. But in the end, I just sort of loved the punch of it.
Do you think it's one reason the title is challenging is because people have a notion of what hate is that is somehow more active than what Barry actually does and
Yeah,
comports himself?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think what he learns to do is hate everybody he grows up with. He learns how to hate even the good people. He detests even the good people because they're just as complicit in what goes on as everybody else. And so, yeah, their passive goodness, he learns to hate. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's the idea that it's sort of something learned and internalized, as opposed to. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously such a charged word, but I think people kind of erroneously associate it with like, oh, hate, that's a thing that you do. Like you burn a cross on somebody's lawn, that's hate. It's an act, as opposed to a weird way of being that's part of all this strange hierarchy and this weird paranoia that is how we live.
Right. It's interesting because you think about hate crimes and you think about what happened in Atlanta and this sort of reluctance on the police's part to call it a hate crime when everybody, I mean, he targeted a specific group of people, and that is hate. And so, yeah, I find it weird how we tiptoe around hate crime when it's kind of obvious from the history of this country that it's fed into this guy. He lives in that milieu, and it taught him how to hate.
You should have let the Atlanta police name your book. They would have called it "Barry Has a Bad Day."
Yeah, Barry has a bad day. Barry's no good bad day.
Barry's very good, no, very bad, no good day. Anyone else have any questions? People from
Chris had a question.
Chris, did you have a question before? You had a I think I may have actually there was a flash of hands, and I think I may have, because I have terrible eyes, I may have like seen those hands on the wrong squares. So now I'm trying to figure out exactly where the hands were that I saw now.
I did not have a question. Sorry.
Okay.
It is okay not to have a question. We don't hate you for not having a question.
I have a question.
Yes.
So for as far as you've written a book, a memoir about a very personal thing that happened to you, and it feels like your novel is a very personal thing. You're drawing on your own experiences. If I'm assuming too much, I'm sorry.
No.
But how was the leap from writing this memoir to writing a novel? Like, what were the challenges you had, or the rewarding experiences you had with going from writing a memoir to a novel?
You know, David Shields once said, and he writes both memoir, nonfiction, and novels, and he's always said, like, with memoirs, all I want to do is talk about the stuff I had to make up in order to get the memoir across. And in novels, all I want to do is tell people that the real stuff, the stuff I didn't make up. And so I was called Yo-Yo Fag when I was in high school, very briefly, nowhere near what Barry goes through. But I was called it. And I went to this teacher that I really liked. He ran juggling club. So I was a member of juggling club, which is really just how to stay a virgin in high school.
And you didn't get a juggle, epithet. You got yo-yo epithet.
Yeah, I got the yo-yo. So I went to the head of juggling club, and I was like, this is what this guy's calling me. And he laughed so hard. And it was just sort of like, it was so crushing, because I was reaching out to a trusted professor and being like, I'm not doing well here. And he just laughed. He was like, your torment is hilarious. But yeah. So going from the memoir to the novel, the novels are just so different based on structure alone. Like, just trying to structure a novel is so much of the work to me. Whereas, memoirs, you can kind of be chronological and it be okay. Carmen Machado is the exception to that. She writes her Into the Dream House chronologically. But yeah, I think it was mostly structure, and it was mostly seeing Barry as not me, and then having to go through that process of writing enough that I was able to be like, okay, this is not me. He can stand on his own 2 feet, and I don't need to keep feeding him my life story. Instead, he has his own story. And so, yeah, novels for me take a lot more wandering in terms of the first draft. I wander a lot, whereas the memoir, I didn't wander nearly as much. So, yeah, maybe that's the difference.
How are your yo-yo skills? Do you still pick up the yo-yo once in a while? And
No, I was terrible at the
Give it a
yo-yo.
whirl.
That's the sad thing. Like, I wasn't even good at the yo-yo. Juggling, I got to the point where I could pass clubs, which I thought was pretty good. But no, awful at the yo-yo. Yeah. Who knows? Who knows why I picked it up? But yeah.
I was pretty good. That's all I'm saying. That's why I asked. They bring up the yo-yo a
pretty
lot,
good?
but yeah,
Oh,
Yeah. it was a thing in
nice.
California.
Oh,
We were all issued yo-yos in grade school.
You were a yo-yo. You were not a hacky sack guy. You're.
Oh, of course I was, but that was later. That was high school.
That feels like a natural progression somehow.
Oh yeah, exactly. Oh, I missed the hacky sack. Yeah, and my Ray-Bans and peg pants and topsiders.
nice.
Oh yeah. All the surfwear. What was going on with all the surfwear?
So much surfwear.
Oh
and
yes, there was so much
many-
stuff.
I remember living relatively far inland and being in all this surfwear all the time. Everyone wore surfwear, and it was like, why are we wearing this? This is very strange.
Yeah,
know,
lots of day glow.
all the
Day-Glow
different
shorts.
Hard Rock Cafe t-shirts.
Yes,
Oh yeah.
exactly. Billabong shorts. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was just all this stuff that had absolutely nothing to do with the cultures that we were actually in.
Yeah.
And then you would see people who are more authentically of the cultures we were actually in and think, well, not that either.
Yeah.
Maybe back to this. If there are 2 choices, I guess I'll wear the surf shirt. I guess I'll wear the Billabong. Yeah, that's. Well, let me ask you. Let me ask you a question just about how this goes a little bit back to, like, it's not really about Gatsby, but it's about how you graft one thing onto another thing as a writer. I mean, I feel like there's so many times where, like, the most basic act of creating anything is just like, looks like I've got this, and for a while you just have this, and you spend weeks and weeks with just like, and nothing's pushing back against. You're just like, I know I like this, and then you find something to push back against it in the other direction, and dialectify it or whatever. I mean,
Right.
like, but like it's and you found that with Gatsby and the force and the countervailing winds of the story from your childhood pushing back against Gatsby. I've heard you respond that way to when we have talked. I'm just going to share this with everyone. We have talked vaguely at times about the Aeneid, and you've gotten so excited about narratives blowing back against it. And that, so it's interesting to me that you did this with Gatsby, that you respond so much to this. Like, I know I can always get you started if I bring up the Aeneid, and you'll give me your type 5 on the Aeneid, and then you'll keep going. Like, what is it? What is it about these kind of, like, these big and sort of iconic, towering, totems of literature and pushing back against them that gets your fire going like that?
I think it's like I think one of the most important things I ever learned was that you don't create in a vacuum. And that, like, being a reader involves, being a writer involves being a really good reader. And so reading as much as I have over the years, I just sort of like borrowing stuff. I remember when I was a freshman in college and I had never read the Odyssey. And so it was the Odyssey, the Aeneid, and Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained. And reading all three of those in a row, you really get a sense of how much they're borrowing from each other.
Right. Yeah.
That the Aeneid borrows so much from the Odyssey to be able to write this next thing. And that Paradise Lost borrows from both of them to do another thing. And so I always sort of love that. And I love finding in other books that same sort of, oh, this is from, oh, and I like how that plays. There's a writer, Robert Boswell, who talks about it like borrowing furniture, using the furniture from other novels in your novel. And I kind of like that. I like that metaphor for it. Because yeah, I love writers who cop to it. Because it is, you don't have to invent everything out of whole cloth. You can borrow, and then you're in conversation with that work, and that's a fun place to be. Because I was, I'm also an academic, so of course, like there's this nerdy fanboy part of me that's always present when I'm writing, and that is always sort of like just spinning in my head, all that stuff. Yeah, and frequently when I'm blocked at writing, I'll get up from my desk and just stare at my bookshelf, and that usually helps. Yeah.
I like that. I like we can imagine that because you're surrounded by books right now. So we just imagine you standing up, facing that, staring at it. Well, I mean, what I love about that too is that like maybe that's where I'm finding the hope and grace in this book too, because there is something about like there's something, I guess, on the most basic level, Little Gatsby-esque about that sort of delight in self-creation that like for a while really has you rooting for Barry, for Garbage, for all of them, like that, because there's such a life in all of them despite the absolute sort of like corridor of doom they're being ushered down, and like it's I don't know, it's in the writing. It's the fact that like that even at your darkest there is such delight and humor and liveliness and energy in your craft. That just, I don't know, that's why I like sad stories with lively, that told with that kind of life. Like it's like that's there's something I don't know, there's something about coping in that I really
Yeah, that the voice is sort of flexible enough, and it's in that flexibility of the voice that you feel like these awful things have happened, but the voice feels like it'll continue.
Yeah. Yes. That's precisely it. That's very well said. Yeah. Damn you! That's very well said.
Come on, Scott.
Right. Let's juggle, and then we juggle, and that's how we end. Is we both juggle. We have a juggle off.
That's. Oh, my life has been building to this point.
No, you've been preparing this. You can actually do the action movie. I've been ready for this all my life. Juggle. Yeah. Juggle Wars.
Juggle off sounded a little bit like Juggalo, but then my mind corrected itself. So
no, that's where I'm
glad you didn't say that.
We captured the Juggalo ethos just now.
That's just now. Speaking of secret societies.
I know, exactly. There's another one. Exactly. So many castes, so many priesthoods, so many that being chief among the topmost, I believe, at this. Who will our first Juggalo Secretary of Labor be? Will that be? Do we have to wait another generation for that? Maybe.
Oh no, Wilbur Ross.
Oh, that was. That's right. It was Wilbur. Wilbur Ross. Ah, classic jungle.
That sexy mountain of a man.
Yeah, it's that raw animal masculinity. Almost too much to take. I'm glad we didn't have to take it too much longer. So that's great. Well, everybody can we do now I'm going to do a lightning round where I'm going to ask each of you really uncomfortable questions. No, I'm not going to do that.
I was kind of hoping you would.
Could definitely do that. No, but it's does anybody have any final questions before we begin the benediction? Don't worry, the benediction takes a long time. There's the doxology. There's a long tail to this, real long tail. But yeah, we're does anybody have any questions here at the not that I would know how to push the hand button since I was completely confused by it last time. So well, listen, this has been really, really wonderful. I have really enjoyed this, David, and I hope you have too. I absolutely have. Anytime I get to bend your ear, I love it. Most of the time by text, but this is I'm delighted to actually get to do this in person.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Scott, and thank you, Javier, for hosting us.
Thank you guys for taking the time out to do this. This was a lot of fun.
I can't wait to see the actual space. When's the when are you when's your hoped for?
We're looking at the end of summer, beginning of fall, right around the corner.
That's
of this year. Yeah.
Yeah. Woo!
Yeah, we're pretty excited.
Indie bookstores.
Yeah.
The only true priesthood. If you want secret knowledge.
Yeah.
Exactly. Indie bookstores.
Indie bookstores.
Can I ask you guys one last question? I like to ask all of our authors this. Is there an author that you haven't read that you're itching to get to, like they're in either one novel or they're in the breadth of their work? Is there somebody you haven't read that you're like, I meant to read that person and have not at this point?
Oh, I mean, I have a lot of those, and some of them are embarrassing. So I'm going to reach for one that's
go to the embarrassing one. Yeah.
Good. I've never read The Man Without Qualities. That's what Robert Musil. That's one that has been from a couple of different quarters of my life. People have there's a small cult around it, and I'm kind of curious. So yeah, I'm gonna do that at some point. I bought it. I have it. I bought a lot of books during the pandemic, and they are in a stack, a gilt stack, like very close to my bed. Not too close. Too close. Yeah, it's me.
Yeah, for me, like, I'm embarrassed by this too. I haven't read Ta-Nehisi Coates. I haven't read anything by him. And I just feel, no, that's not true. I've read some of the Black Panther comics that he's written and the Captain America he's written, but I haven't read any of his books. And so he's who I would say, which is hugely embarrassing.
I got a lot more.
He's going to write the new Superman, right?
Yeah, he's going to write the new Superman, which is going to be awesome.
Yeah,
that's pretty great.
And the word on the street is that there's another reboot of Superman, and they're thinking about Michael B. Jordan as Superman, which is like,
oh, is that?
I would watch that.
I had not seen that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I would watch that. That's all. He's awesome.
Yeah,
yeah. Michael B. Jordan.
That would be amazing.
That would be very cool. I would turn up for that. That's not a lot of superhero things at this point that I've not that I'm immune to it. I just watch them. I never watch the movies. What I do is I I watch like 6-minute clips after my kids go to bed of
Oh, yeah.
people hitting each other at high speeds. And that's for some reason what I need, like between the kids
Just
going to
watch-
bed and washing
Just
dishes.
watch the fight scenes. That's all you have to watch.
That's it. Like
Watch
one
the end.
quips and people hitting each other. That's what I
Yeah.
want after my children go to bed. Like, I don't know why that is.
Well, because that's what it was before they went to bed. Just
Yeah,
fight
what-
scenes and quips.
Yeah, except the quips did not make any sense.
Yeah.
It'd be like, and you are a rabbit with rockets in its ears and something, and you're like, oh wow, that sounds like a real Iron Man zinger
Yeah.
right there. That's
My son right now pretty much will take anything you say and add the word booty to it.
oh wow, you're the booty suffix.
Yeah, a lot of booty. A lot of booty dances.
Well,
Yeah.
you got a lot to you've got a lot to add on that.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Yes.
got that series.
All right. All right.
Thank you guys
All
so
right, everybody.
much. We'll
Thank
end it
you
on
all.
that note.
We're talking about our children and booty.
Yeah,
So,
booty.
Probably time to go.
It's
All
not
right.
too late to click on the link in the bio to buy all 3 books. How I Learned to Hate in Ohio.
Yeah.
And Excel. Yes. Y'all
Yeah,
did it at the same
Excel.
time.
Excel is excellent.
Fantastic. Do you have a copy there? I don't have a copy here. I'm sorry, Scott. It is wonderful. Yes. I was lucky enough to read an early version of Excel. There we go. And
Oh, nice.
and got to and was able to introduce Scott at a conference, and it was real honor for me. Thank you.
So
So
good.
thanks everyone. Yeah, it's fantastic. My son loved it, by the way. And thanks everyone for showing up, and tune into our next. We have an event next week. It'll be, go to our website, exileandbookbill.com, and you'll be able to see all of our events. Thanks everyone. If you guys can stick around for just a few seconds after.
Sure.
Oh, sure.
Okay, thanks. Thanks
Bye,
everyone.
Catherine.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Chris.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.